Welcome to Retinal Realities, brought to you from Retina South Africa with thanks to Roche Products.
Hi, my name's Claudette Medifant, and I'm the Head of Science for Retina South Africa. Welcome to this edition of Retinal Realities. It's my absolute pleasure to be speaking to Harry Rosen, the CEO of the South African Optometric Association, and a long-time collaborator and friend to improve the patient journey with Retina South Africa. Welcome, Harry.
Thank you so much, Claudette. And yes, absolutely. We've enjoyed a relationship for many years. It's an absolute privilege to be able to answer some of your questions today, Claudette. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry. And of course, I know most of them, but the people out there don't. And of course, often get asked, what's the difference between an optometrist and an ophthalmologist? And today we're here. So in eye care, what is the role of an optometrist?
Yeah, I think that's an important question because, as you say, there are different members of the eye care team. So optometrists could be regarded as highly skilled and regulated primary healthcare practitioners of the eye and the visual system. They provide comprehensive eye and vision care, and that includes aspects of the examination like refraction, it includes dispensing, it involves the management of disease in the eye, the rehabilitation of conditions of the visual system, and so forth. So in essence, the optometrist is to be considered as the primary eye care professional, being the first line of defense for vision protection and the management of eye and vision-related conditions. And just as a matter of interest, Claudette, optometry was declared quite recently, actually, as an essential service by the government, by the Department of Employment and Labour. So the optometrist has such an important role to play. Of course, with particular reference to vision and eye health, but depending on how the questions go later on, there are other consequences that also have a positive impact on the treatment of patients in general.
But you're quite right. An optometrist is probably the first person that a patient goes to when they have a problem with their eye. And I think that almost sets the path of the journey that they're going to have towards treatment, particularly in complex cases. So do people actually need a referral to go and see an optometrist?
No, not at all. As you've correctly indicated, an optometrist is the first port of call. And also, members of the public are encouraged to have a regular eye exam. So you don't need a referral for that, simply going to the optometry practice, or making an appointment. So the answer to your question is no, there's no necessity for a referral to an optometrist.
And are there optometrists in the state health system?
Yes, there are. There are about 3,000 practices in the private sector, Claudette. But to answer your question specifically, there are about 350 optometrists who are employed in the state sector throughout South Africa in the various provinces.
And now that optometrists can also diagnose eye conditions, how would I know if the optometrist I'm going to has the correct instruments to be able to do retinal screening or a low vision assessment?
Sure. No, that's a great question, and it's a difficult one to answer, but I think it's fair to say as a starting point, just to go back to what we said early on about optometrists. Optometry is a regulated profession, and as such, they are obligated to adhere to clinical standards that's determined by the regulatory authority, which happens to be the Health Professions Council of South Africa. So the equipment is standardized for optometry in South Africa, and that is in accordance with the clinical guidelines as determined, as I said, by the HPCSA.
And what about retinal screening?
Well, from a retinal screening point of view, yes, there is equipment. I think also it's fair to say, not all the equipment is the same. So for the performance of specific procedures, if you don't mind me repeating, there are standardized procedures as dictated actually by the regulatory authority. And that includes the equipment necessary to perform various professional acts, which includes retinal screening.
Today, with all the sophisticated equipment, and
yes,
we know with diabetic retinopathy and sometimes with retinitis pigmentosa, the initial degeneration happens far out on the periphery. Will an optometrist without a fundus camera be able to pick up those early signs of retinal damage?
If I can just take a step back, Everything that an optometrist does is in accordance with what's referred to as a scope of profession. It's all based on competency. And that really is underpinned by the appropriate education and training, experience, the environment in which the performance of professional acts are conducted. And that includes the use of the appropriate equipment. So it would be absolutely inappropriate, for an optometrist to get involved in the diagnosis of any eye health related condition without having the appropriate equipment. So your question was initially, if I understood you, how would you know if they've got the appropriate equipment? From a patient's point of view, it's a very difficult question to answer. They're going to have to be totally reliant on the fact that there are guidelines in place. And if an optometrist is found, or any doctor or any regulated profession that is moving outside what is regarded as scope of profession or the standard, the clinical standards, that actually is a violation of the rules. So that's the best I can do.
I know. I understand. And I think what I'm trying to say now is if you go and see an optometrist, he can't diagnose you with a retinal condition. But if he suspects it, what would his next steps be?
Yes. So where there is a suspicion of any condition, and this is with specific reference to retinal condition, the next steps would be referral where applicable, and that referral would be, as an example, to an ophthalmologist. An ophthalmologist is a doctor who specializes in eye disease and also is a surgeon. And also, I think it's important to state that there's a facility via the Vula app to refer to Retina South Africa as well. So they would have to refer accordingly, specifically, though, as I said, to a profession that has expertise in that particular condition, in this case, a retinal condition.
Thank you for that, Harry. That's a tricky one because you don't know what you can't see. But I think we need to encourage people, even if they have a diagnosis of a retinal condition or something equally important. But how often should everybody go and see an optometrist?
Well, the rule of thumb, Claudette, is that members of the public should undergo a comprehensive eye health and vision examination at least once a year. It's an annual examination. Now, if a pathology has been picked up, it may require more frequent examinations, but the rule of thumb, as I said, is once a year. And you appreciate, it's not just a matter of going to see whether you need spectacles or to check to see whether the lens is okay, as we mentioned earlier on. Sometimes there's an underlying pathology that can't be picked up without the examination, and that could be an eye health pathology. It could be a systemic condition. Many systemic conditions can be picked up, like hypertension, as an example, can be picked up by somebody who's well versed in eye health. There could be some form of, as I said, underlying pathology. But your question was specific. The recommendation is at least once a year.
And what about children before they go to school?
That's an important point. There are countries, I think Australia is one of them, where, children, preschool children are advised. In fact, it's more than being advised. They are encouraged and obligated to undergo these examinations. But from our point of view, we still stick to the once a year principle. The preschool kids, before they go to school, that would be a good time to start. But as I said, if there's any pathology that's been picked up, it could be more frequent than that.
Thank you for that, Harry. And we try to encourage our patients also, even if they've had a diagnosis of a severe retinal condition, and then they don't go back and see an ophthalmologist or an optometrist, and we try to encourage them because having a severe retinal condition doesn't mean you're not going to get something like diabetic macular edema or glaucoma. So raised pressures that an optometrist I know can test very easily is something that should be checked regularly. And we take your point. At least every year.
Yes.
So what is the relevance now of World Optometry Week?
Yeah, no, that's another great question. I think it's fair to say that our sight is often described as the most delightful of our senses. And yet, if you stick to South Africa, there are thousands of South Africans who we regard as needlessly blind. And the reason why I use the word needlessly is because 80% of blindness has been shown to be avoidable. And that avoidance really influenced, as an example, by affordability factors, accessibility factors, lack of knowledge, and so forth. And for those members of the public who do not have their annual eye examination, they basically put themselves at risk. So World Optometry Week, which is celebrated between the 23rd and the 28th of March each year, with the 23rd of March being marked as World Optometry Day. This period is generally celebrated to create awareness about the challenges of eye health, with increasing avoidable blindness and visual impairment, and the important role played by optometrists as a profession. So that really, it's like a megaphone which shouts and screams to educate the public and encourage them to have their eyes examined on a regular basis.
And of course, we're also very concerned at Retina South Africa about the increasing use of screens, especially for preteen children. With that shortened length of focus with the phone, what it could be doing to their eyes. So we try and also create the awareness of children should be outside playing, not always on their screens. Would you support that?
100%. You're referring to myopia. I mean, if you look at the statistics and some of the claims that have been made by the World Health Organization, they're saying by the year 2050, about 50% of the world population will be myopic. And you've hit the nail on the head, by what you've said, where kids are encouraged to have more exposure to sunlight, etc., etc. And a difficult challenge, but there it is. So the answer to your question is absolutely support your position.
Thank you for that. Now, we know that ready-made readers are available in various retail outlets, and they are relatively inexpensive. If they appear to improve vision, is it still necessary for anyone to see an optometrist?
Yeah, once again, it's such an important point because there is a misnomer, and if you don't mind me being blunt, to say a high degree of ignorance regarding the role played by the ready-made reader. I think a lot of people, even if they experience, particularly the older patient, when I say older, I've got to be careful. I'm talking about people 40 years plus who may experience a little bit of visual disturbance or blurriness. And by purchasing a ready-made reader, that could correct it. And it's really, in many ways, has the risk of masking symptoms. So indeed, the ready-made reader does play a very important role for particular types of visual disturbance. But generally, those ready-made readers should never, ever replace the necessity for a regular eye exam. And just as a matter of interest, the ready-made reader is actually regulated in South Africa. So without going into the powers and so forth like that, there's actually a warning that's supposed to accompany the sale of ready-made readers. So when you see these racks with ready-made readers, actually each ready-made reader should have like a little tag or something, a warning that says, something along the lines that diseases causing blindness can be detected only by having a regular professional eye examination. These reading glasses are only for short-term use by persons over the age of 40 years and are not suitable for driving purposes. So I think that just puts it into perspective to say, yes, they do have a place and a role, but should never, ever replace the necessity for an eye exam.
I quite agree with you, but I think a lot of people are, of course, propelled towards those ready-made readers because of price. Do
Exactly.
lots of optometrists have what we call community days where they might do reduced price frames and lenses or even do free screening?
Yeah, no, for sure. I would say the vast majority have these type of, as you call them, community days. Especially from the Optometric Association's point of view, we dedicate a lot of resource to the provision of eye care to communities in need. In the past, there's a very important phase of the year referred to as Eye Care Awareness Month, which is September going into October, where many activities took place, but that's changed a lot. I mean, Eye Care Awareness Month still is a very important phase of the calendar, but you'll find that many initiatives are introduced and maintained throughout the year these days. And many of the members of the association, to answer your question more specifically now, yes, of course, they do make available these very special concession days for those individuals and communities in need.
That's great, Harry. And people could, of course, I'm sure, contact the association to find out and identify what's available in their own area. But other than that, what is actually the role of the South African Optometric Association?
Well, I'd like to just celebrate a little bit, if I may, because the South African Optometric Association celebrated its 100-year anniversary. And incredible as it may seem, Claudette, because you were part of that celebration in 2024, Gauteng. But the South African Optometric Association is a professional association. We registered as a non-profit company, and we represent the professions of optometry and dispensing opticianry in South Africa. Now, our membership includes practitioners from all sort of practice modalities. You mentioned the public sector, independent practitioners, group practices, franchises, etc., as well as industry and academia. So the primary objective of the association is to promote and protect the collective interests of its members. And that, as a result, advances the professions and serves the public interest. So that really is, in a nutshell, a brief overview. We often refer to ourselves as the eyes, the ears, the voice, and the conscience of the profession. We keep a lookout for the profession. We keep our ears to the ground. We are the official advocate or the voice of the profession. And then from a conscience point of view, those are unbending ethical standards. And if you don't mind me going back to your question you asked earlier on, that really pertains also to adherence to the clinical guidelines, which includes the appropriate equipment.
Well, that is important for people to know, that at the heart of what the service that they're getting is a totally ethical and organized. And I might say we've worked with the Optometric Association for many years, and we're always impressed at the level of professionalism and ethics exhibited by the organization. And we know, of course, if that's what's happening at the top, it does filter through to the members. So Retina South Africa would like to thank you and all the optometrists who always participate so willingly with free screening during World Retina Week. And thank you for imparting some of your vast knowledge to us. And thank you for being with us on Retinal Realities.
Claudette, thank you so much. I can tell you the respect is reciprocated, and it's been an absolute pleasure to be able to spend some time with you and hopefully have answered your questions satisfactorily. But thank you so much again.
And in parting, if anybody has any questions, how can they get hold of the Optometric Association?
Well, there are two, I would call them mechanisms or channels. The one is via email. It's info@saoa.co.za. Alternatively, they can phone our offices at 011 805 4517.
Thank you so much, Harry, and our very best wishes for the upcoming Congress that we will be joining you with at Durban, and thanks for being with us today.
Thank you so much. That's 23 weeks away. Thank you, Claudette.
You've been listening to Retinal Realities with thanks to Roche Products. Visit our Retina South Africa website, which is www.retinasa.org.za, to listen to more podcasts that deal with various aspects related to vision loss. And don't forget to subscribe to the series by clicking the subscribe button below.